As a general preface to this, the concept of autoimmune hoax conditioning, as I've termed it, posits that the system has evolved from a parasitic entity requiring a human host into an apex predator seeking its total displacement to fuel an emergent, resource heavy algocracy. By orchestrating a series of transparently flawed feints, for example, the Corona event in 2020, the predator has effectively rewired the dissident's intellectual immune system to treat all future signals of potential genuine lethality as mere fear porn or theatrical scams. This manufactured confidence creates a sort of Cassandra inversion, where reflexive disbelief becomes the ultimate delivery mechanism for a high mortality event to come down the pipe in the future. Or, of course, perhaps with this entire narrative that we see being put into place right now. I'm not just talking about Hanta, I'm talking about the poly crisis in general.
Well, let's go back to what the WEF told us 2 or 3 years ago in a paper called Polycrisis. So, first of all, none of us knew who the WEF was before COVID. They had a coming out party with Bond-like villains, Ferrari and
what a
Schwab.
douchebag he is, speaking of which. Yes,
I know. So they had these Bond villains come out and tell us about the Great Reset. Then they start talking about the next problem is the polycrisis. And they said cyber attacks, another pandemic, and war. What do we have now? We got Besson talking about AI could steal your money from the bank. You got war. You got a hantavirus. And let's just toss in aliens as a distraction on top of that. It feels like
but the grid going down would be easy.
Yeah.
What you need, an easy one.
You need people begging for money printing.
Right.
So that's where so you cannot just print money out and say, we're going to print a bunch of money. You need an excuse. And COVID was a perfect excuse.
And even maximizes casualties due to the decoupling of fear and threat detection from the masses, of whom will be confounded as to what is to be believed. The prey, blinded by the light of their own perceived enlightenment, walk mockingly into a terminal kill shot while convinced they are merely witnessing another psychological operation. In this state of, as I've termed it, incredulicide, the system not only settles the competition for finite energy resources, as of course are allotted to and are being increasingly allotted to data centers, the growing infrastructure for the technocratic superstate, but it secures its post-collapse or post-reset legitimacy by blaming the ensuing devastation. It could be from a sort of planned biowarfare agent, basically a mass poisoning event, which of course is masquerades under the veneer of a pandemic or something along those lines, a viral outbreak, what have you. And it's done on the very skepticism and skeptics it works so meticulously to cultivate, so they'll blame us, right? When people see the physicality, the localized physicality of deaths, of course they will decouple themselves from the conspiratorial algorithmic stream, and they may go back to legitimizing the system itself, and of course legitimizing the technocratic system. In essence, a narrative, an event of total captivating fear that causes real physical death. And of course, from there, people are so confused, so confounded, and in such a state, they're so hyper suggestible that they will simply just acquiesce to any form of given stability, and of course the prefigured solution, which is the digital ID, the technocratic superstate, and everything that goes along with that. Quote, been scouring YouTube last night and this morning for Hanta videos. Can't find one where top comments or two are not, it's a scam, don't believe the government, Hanta in Hebrew and Hungarian means scam, etc. It just seems too obvious what they are doing. Is this a deliberate feint? Needs must would dictate that we should think like a tactician, a predator, to observe the movements of a predator most effectively. This is what Eros stated. Of course, given the data center build-out and the resource energy demands for the AI infrastructure, mass depopulation will be required somewhere down the line. This can be done through a multitude of means. It may, of course, just simply be through many pandemics, or plandemics rather. And all they simply will do is impose a sort of incremental pharmacological device, administer it en masse, that will incrementally whittle away the population. That's a potential. Another one is simply, as we will go through in this scenario, and as we've mentioned previously. But one such avenue of resolution is exactly through the scenario in which we have laid out. Thus, the blame would be deflected from the system itself. Naturally, such narrative respite would also ensure that these systems can maintain their own legitimacy for a little while longer as they transition entirely into the post-human society. This is what is at the heart of the polycrisis era that we see now. Famine, war, pestilence, biowarfare, death, and of course the UFO fiasco too. I recall at the beginning of COVID, I was sure that this would be the long-touted biowarfare agent or mass poisoning that would ensure such a depopulation, but alas, it was not, in hindsight, or at least the needlecraft has not produced such systemic evisceration of the human host, at least not upon a large scale and within a 5-year time span. So in the face of this immediate development, the auto-hoax, or nothing ever happens sentiment, assumed total control and the majority share of informational control in these dissident circles. It is to the point now that an orthodoxy has taken over these said circles, and it has reached such a crescendo that many can have criticism levied against them when they seek to engage in predictive analysis or tactical brainstorming, or thinking as the Predator does as a means of unlocking this, unlocking his broader scale objectives. As is plainly evident, they seek the extermination of a vast swathe of the human population. It's only logical. And they have been discussing such a requisite for centuries. The expert class, and of course their desired technocratic or utopian vision, this sort of negentropic or autopoietic system, a self-regulating, self-entropic negating system. And such is the occult endgame in bringing forth and nurturing the seedling of a system of biodigital autopoiesis until it can bloom into a fully autonomous digital mechanism. Ultimately, they will make AI into a sort of new god, as Yuval Noah Harari states. So it will, in essence, ensure that the potential of God, this sort of divine spark in humanity, can no longer awaken humanity ever once this system comes into place. And that is because the AI will assume that divine spark. You will never be bored. You will never be alone with your own thoughts. You will never be alone with the divine spark ever again, because they want you completely tuned in to the technocratic system on repeat. This sort of platonic cave of biodigital perpetual entertainment and vapid titillation through short-form content and social media platforms and the quote-unquote social media feed, right? Of course, that's what barn animals get in their trough.
You think everyone has a birthday if there's 8 billion people in the world, but there's only 365 days? I think about this a lot.
People share.
Do you share?
Yeah.
I
Like what? Share what?
like sharing. Do you like sharing?
Some things.
What do you not like sharing?
We're developing a society because of all of these different toxins known to affect brain function. We're seeing a society that not only has a lot more people of lower IQ, but a lot fewer people of higher IQ. In other words, a dumbing down, a chemical dumbing down of society. So everyone's sort of mediocre. That leaves them dependent on government because they can't excel. We have these people of lower IQ who are totally dependent. Then we have this mass of people who are going to believe anything they're told because they can't really think clearly. And very few people of very high IQ who have good cognitive function who can figure this all out. And that's what they want. So, you can kind of piece it together as to why they are so insistent in spending so many hundreds of millions of dollars of propaganda money to dumb down society.
Okay. You're saying they're brainwashing. Okay, you're saying these people that are experts in brainwashing is using the Department of Education to brainwash our children.
Yes.
What are they after? Why are they doing it?
Well, if you want to move a country from a free individualistic economy,
Which we have.
yes, or had,
Or had. Okay.
to a planned economy, you have to do it through the schools. You have to dumb down and brainwash, change the attitudes and values. You have to completely, social engineering has to go on constantly, and many teachers know what I'm talking about. And people are going to say, well, when did this start? And who on earth ever did this? Why would a plan like that be allowed to be carried out?
That's right.
Well, then you have to go back to 1934, which I will do, and we have to go to the three-pronged fork, okay? So I do think that the watershed year, although you can go back to the early part of the century when the Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegie Corporation were deeply involved in education, and that it was decided then that Carnegie would deal with the international part and Rockefeller domestic. They commissioned the American Historical Association to put together a study of the social studies, and they came up with lots of volumes, but I have one little volume, Conclusions and Recommendations for the Social Studies. And basically that little one is an original book. I wish I'd brought it with me. Too bad. But I don't even dare let it out of the house. It's so important. It called for changing the United States through the schools from a free individualistic economy to a socialist, collectivized, planned economy in the New World Order.
It says that in the book.
Yes.
And that book was written when?
In 1934.
By who?
It was the Carnegie Corporation paid for it. The American Historical Association put it together. And
can people get that book in the library?
No.
No?
No, they can't. They were very instrumental in getting the Elementary and Secondary Education Act passed, which, as I said before, changed education from knowledge, content-based, academic, to performance-based behavior. And from that time on, because that was necessary for what we're looking at now with school to work agenda is the planned economy is performance-based.
So they're training workers.
They're training
not thinkers, not leaders.
Exactly. At that time, you had a general, Buck Chisholm, a Canadian general psychiatrist, who was a very close friend of Alger Hiss's. And he gave a speech in 1945 to the World Health Organization, which basically recommended getting rid of the conscience.
Wow.
Yes. And he said we would do it through the schools. We would retrain the teachers to be little psychiatrists. He said it is an international system they're looking at. They're going to change the behavior of the children. They're going to change the teachers' training. They're going to do everything. He told them everything.
And they didn't believe him?
No, they just, well, you know what goes on.
Can you tell me what time this is?
Okay, I know the long one is the hour.
Yeah.
So that's 10. Oh my God.
10 what? Around what time is this?
I'm not sure.
Give me your best guess.
I want to say 10:15.
Yeah. Do you know how many moons the Earth has? Around how many, if you had to guess?
2?
Yes. Do you know what two countries border the USA?
No.
Like what's on top of us and what's below us?
Isn't the North Pole below us?
Yeah. And what else?
And what is above us? Is it Europe? Because
Is that your guess?
yes, that's my guess.
Yes. If it's Monday right now, what day of the week will it be in 14 days?
If it's Monday right now, how many days? Like day of the week? Like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or like a day?
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
14 days. Today, Monday. I'll say probably like a Wednesday or Thursday.
Yes. Do you know what's the difference between Mexico and New Mexico?
Nah.
Are they the same thing?
Maybe. I don't know. I think.
My name is Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath. I'm a former teacher turned cognitive neuroscientist who focuses on human learning. And I do not receive funding, nor have I ever, from big tech. So a sad fact our generation has to face is this. Our kids are less cognitively capable than we were at their age. Every generation has outperformed their parents, and that's exactly what we want. We want sharper kids. And the reason for this largely has been school. Each generation spends more time in school. We use school to develop our cognition until Gen Z. Gen Z is the first generation in modern history to underperform us on basically every cognitive measure we have, from basic attention to memory to literacy to numeracy to executive functioning to even general IQ, even though they go to more school than we did. So why? What happened? What happened around 2010 that decoupled schooling from cognitive development? It can't be school. Schools basically look the same. It can't be biology. This hasn't had enough time to change. The answer appears to be the tools we are using within schools to drive that learning. Across 80 countries, as Jean was just saying, if you look at the data, once countries adopt digital technology widely in schools, performance goes down significantly, to the point where kids who use computers about 5 hours per day in school for learning purposes will score over 2/3 of a standard deviation less than kids who rarely or never touch tech at school. And that's across 80 countries. Bring it home to the US. Let's go to the US. We have our NAEP. That's our big data. Take any state, and here's a fun experiment you can try. Take any state NAEP data, compare that to when that state adopted one-to-one technology widely, and watch what happens. The NAEP data will plateau and then start to drop. But of course, this is all correlative. What we really want is causative. To get causation, what you need is academic research and you need mechanisms, explanations for why we're seeing what we're seeing. Luckily, we have academic research stretching back to 1962 that shows the exact same story for 60 years. When tech enters education, learning goes down. In fact, because what do kids do on computers? They skim. So rather than determining what do we want our children to do and gearing education towards that, we are redefining education to better suit the tool. That's not progress, that is surrender. So as we go through our discussion today, there's going to be a lot of talk about smartphones and social media, rightly so. But I'm the voice here to remind you that even in schools, it doesn't matter what the size of the screen is, if it's a phone, if it's a laptop, if it's a desktop, and it doesn't matter who bought it. Is it school sanctioned? Does it have the word education stamped on it? It doesn't matter. All of these things are also going to hurt learning, which in turn are going to hurt our kids' cognitive development, right at the time when we need our kids to be sharper than we are.
My ministers will also proceed with the introduction of digital ID that will modernize how citizens interact with public services.
I'm sorry, sir. You need a valid digital ID to enter.
But this is my ID. It's on my phone.
I'm sorry, sir. There's nothing I can do.
My students can't read. They're not recognizing letters. They're not recognizing letter sounds.
Attention spans are waning because everything is high stimulation. They can just scroll, watch less than a minute.
We are in a crisis mode in American schools.
The kids can't read, write, or remember anything or use their imaginations, and the teachers are wondering why.
So they want you in this sort of perpetually vacant state, this huskified tabula rasa of a state. And through those means and through that overarching mean, they can ensure that you will never again connect with God, right? those who are not governed by God, that divine, innate divine spark that makes us human, I'm not even, that thing that's even beyond the mortality of our own body, of our own life, at least our own mortal life. If they give up being governed by God, then they will be governed by tyrants. Because the human being, in its quest to become God, can only become the simulacra of God, which is, of course, a tyrant. They focus not on the authority of God, but on the power of God. And there is a distinction. Power is the ability to control the consciousness of someone. Authority is the legitimate right to rule in a just manner. And it requires no cajoling, no coercion, no force. So ultimately, God is of authority. Yet, conversely, power, the systems themselves, are fully of this sort of tyrannical bent, which is the simulacra of God. So everything they're doing is to effectively remake God on earth. It's very Kabbalistic. Kabbalah states with the creation myth that they put forth, and by the way, every other esoteric school of thought, at least extant today, within the Near East and the West, and of course this has come to encompass the entire world, meaning all systems of power, all corporate nation states, all these national entities, all of them, every single scintilla of their civil servant class, though it's compartmentalized and some have a greater understanding of it than others, all of the political class is entirely enthralled to this Kabbalistic maxim, this idea. So basically, in Kabbalah and the creation myth, the idea is that God deconstructed himself, that the tree grew from the canopy or the crown, the keter, downwards, right? And this is why, of course, this entire transition, beginning in 2020, that itself started with the corona, because remember, the tree, it's all inverted, right? This is where the whole satanic or adversarial idea comes from. At least this sort of well-worn and well-trodden talking point within the conspiracy circles regarding the satanic reversal. Well, basically, it stems from Kabbalah in this regard. So it starts from the corona, the canopy, the crown of the tree, and God deconstructs himself through all of the various vessels or sephira. This is what's known as the Sheveret HaKalim, right? You have the Simsum, which is the Ein, the nothingness, the limitless light of the nothingness, that it contracts itself to create space, the probability space for the discharge of its own potential into manifestable creation, essentially. And this congeals into the vessels, into the sephira, which are the primal overarching archetypes of the given metaphysical system in which we reside within. And then, of course, that itself works its way down. God, quote unquote, deconstructs himself all the way down until you get to the Malkuth, which, of course, in Kabbalah, similar to Gnosticism, Kabbalah states that Shekinah basically entered, there's several ways they describe it, but one such way is she entered a slumber as she fell into matter. Sophia, it's the same idea, right? Sophia fell into matter, or was trapped by Yaldabaoth, which is the abortive creation, the mishap of her hubris of attempting to be like that of the pleroma, or the fullness, or the Ein. So anyway, And this is what you also see with the hantavirus with Miriam, right? Leo dies, which is the dead son, the lion, and he is carried on the boat on the barge of Ra for 13 days. Of course, Osiris had 30. Well, at least ISIS found 13 of his dissected and dismembered members or appendages. The 14th, of course, was hidden. That was his phallus. She artificially established that. By the way, there's a sort of esoteric bent to that, which surrounds AI, which is that effectively the last part of Osiris, the Lord of the Dead, man essentially within his sort of deadened or material state, that he must re-establish God vis-a-vis a sort of artificial gold, and of course an artificial phallus, right, which is that which disseminates will. It disseminates the ejaculate of the creative juices, right? It disseminates the divine spark, which fertilizes, of course, the womb, which is the Konoma, or the cave, the Platonic cave. It is that which brings light to the darkness, right? That guides the darkness, that, of course, the darkness being the society, that guides the writhing masses of the uninitiated. This is, of course, the idea behind the owl as well. The owl sees in the dark, right? They are the owls. They are seeking to scientifically and technocratically, through a rule by expert, and of course a rule by algorithm as well, an algocracy, rule over the uninitiated masses, which are going to become more and more and more dumbed down as the years pass by, as we're seeing. I mean, the generations that follow us, the Generation Z and millennials, so going into Generation Alpha, Generation Beta, and so on and so forth, they will become so utterly devoid of any critical faculty or creative output or potential for epiphanous understanding, that sort of aha moment, that, again, they will be completely devoid of God. They'll be detached from their divine spark. And this is the system that they desire, effectively. But so to get back, so God deconstructs himself from the crown downwards. This is why we started off the Corona event in 2020. We're going to work our way down to the roots. We're going to go into the chthonic roots, the Platonic cave. We're going to be immersed into darkness, into Negredo, into Putrefactio. And then from there, we can be rebuilt once again. And, of course, rebuilt in the image of the sort of godmen, right? The self-styled godmen of our sort of strange Kafkaesque society in which we dwell. This theatre of the absurd, which we have to endure for the remainder of our days. So that's effectively what's going on with that. Ultimately, we are all ripe for such a scenario, and this was most likely the overarching objective of the Corona operation. It was not merely the needlecraft damage, for that in and of itself may have been simply a means of manufacturing this confidence, this vindication within the conspiratorial circles, within the dissident population, and providing them with a sort of artificial sense of a consensus awakening, a manufactured confidence, right? Through a kind of quasi-astroturfing or the appearance, as though the system are weak and losing their grip of the social messaging. Again, this was all planned, part of what Kircher stated in his Mundus Subterraneus, which is that you depressurize the system periodically with the infliction upon yourself, upon the system, that you run with a sort of controlled chaos, a controlled devolution, a controlled involution, a controlled destruction. Again, this is part of the alchemical magnum opus. You begin with the nigredo, the blackening, or the putrefactio, the mass putrefaction of the system. So this is ultimately what we're seeing right now. This is why the system, people are scratching their heads saying, why is everything becoming so, utterly broken in our day-to-day living now? Why is the system appearing to be self-sabotaging? Well, the reason for it is because this is being run alchemically. You're being run by alchemists, by experts, by a scientific elite. They do not view power and the world and the system itself, which of course they are maintaining and they are the architects thereof. They don't view all of this the way you do. In fact, even the MSM Plus, or the conspiratorially minded, the dissident population, if you will, and again, as stated, those are growing by the day. I mean, it's literally at this point, it's an exponential growth in dissident sentiment within the system. Again, I would stress that perhaps, as intellectual speculation, this is planned in some way. Even the conspiratorially minded, they can't view this thing holistically. They can't necessarily put themselves into the shoes of the scientific elite, right? Of the ruling bodies, of the ruling class, of the expert class, right? As they self-style. Because it's to view these things would be to lead yourself to willfully and actively deconstruct absolutely everything that provides you a temporal anchorage into the world itself, into the society itself as you know it. Once you strip away all of this, yes, it's very liberating. You could even say it's epistemically and cognitively, even spiritually, you could say, emancipating. But ultimately, unless you begin to build your own monomyth, unless you begin to anchor yourself into your own self-constructed understandings of the world, you could call them axioms or maxims. Again, that anchor. Unless you forge your own anchor, you will be in limbo, and it will take its toll on you, right? It will take its toll on you. I mean, that's why the majority still abide within these systems which are self-evident, self-evidently, enslaving. They tie you to the mast. They shackle you to the posts, right? You're manacled to this sort of mass extraction machine that is without any care, consideration, or a capacity for emotional reasoning. It views all of this as data, as mere ones and zeros, a bit like the AI itself, right? It's effectively the sort of deification of their own, instilled worldview. That being the ruling class, that is. But the majority enjoy the security. They enjoy not having to think about any of life's deeper mysteries and questions, and to philosophize upon the edge of it all. To yes, act as the lumat, the madman, the fool, who, carries himself over the precipice, either unknowingly or of course actively seeking the understandings, the deeper mysteries, the structure of the watery illusion of the world itself, to understand who is behind that fire, who did sequestered from view, obfuscating our understanding of reality, and establishing a sort of system of projections, of simulacras onto the cave wall. Who is doing this? Why are they doing this? What type of projections are, continually rear their ugly heads within this system? Meaning, what type of events and formulas and blueprints and scripts do they continuously and perpetually utilize and employ? Most people won't do that. Even in the conspiracy circles, they will reach a threshold, typically, and they will go no further. And, don't get me wrong, we all are tethered to some sort of illusions. But of course, if we are cognizant of our own limitations in terms of human cognition, the limitations inherent with that, then at least we are honest about the illusions that we may be tethered to, right? And hopefully in time we become, to a greater extent, freer and freer and freer from these said illusions by working through them, by introspectively investigating our own blind spots, our own sort of fantasies that we've become beholden to, or we have tethered ourselves to, or we have used as a crutch, or what have you, right? We can get rid of those. So we see from an Australian, and this is rather interesting, I didn't make a note of this, but it's from an Australian exercise or drill. I mean, we've seen these before. And this is a quote from it. Quote, "The multi-day crisis scenario explores the impact of fuel supply shortages, the transmission of HPA1, HPAI H5 bird flu." Wow, that's a mouthful. Flu to animals and humans, natural hazards, power outages, international repatriations, supply chain disruptions, and social unrest. So ultimately what you're seeing here is the polycrisis, and they always do it under this sort of exploration of scenarios through multi-day crisis drills or exercises. And we see within the comments, so this is just the top comments from that video. I didn't actually make a note of the video, unfortunately. I think it's from the Ice Age Farmer. I think it is from the Ice Age Farmer, I believe. It's one of his recent ones. Anyway, quote, "A boot stomping on a human face forever. Orwell's words never rang truer. I still see people wearing those useless, ridiculous face diapers. So many are still so gullible. If bird FLU is airborne, it's airborne by being dropped out of planes. This is all BS. Election year, V again. What will it be? Bird FLU or Hanta? I'm tired of this BS." We can go on and on and on. People are opposed to the elites, right? And I mean, you can, even on mainstream channels, you can see it. People saying, I'm not falling for this BS again, right? People mentioning psyops. They spray us daily. Constant fear porn to create loosh for the demons they serve, right? Pay no heed to it. It's all chaos magic, right? No epidemics. They are altering the cells using what they administered last time, using WBA BAN. This is the sort of cell tower network, the 5G network, right? The wireless body area network. Basically the Internet of all things, or the Internet of all bodies in this case. So as you can see, people are primed with this sentiment, right? And as we know from, as far back as utopian writers have been putting their thoughts on how to control human society to paper or papyrus, or to, of course, clay tablet, as we see with, for example, Plato, and in his book The Republic, and several, the Timaeus and Critias. I mean, there's a whole host of them. We can see that he outrightly identifies, he implies, more than once, that essentially everything you see in society, I mean, this is what the Platonic cave allegory is about. Everything you see in society is ultimately, nothing is from the grassroots. This is all simulacra, right? None of it is grassroots. They will choose the leaders for you. They will choose the narratives for you, even in the alternative. They will choose all of this for you, and they will provide you it, right? And it's easier now. I mean, all of this is fast-tracked and almost to the point of pure and full automation through that of social media platforms. They have digitized media, and thus by digitizing media, they have centralized it, right? People are no longer consumers, they're prosumers. So what that means is they ultimately are lean, mean data generating machines. All of these social media platforms, as we see, for example, from the DARPA LifeLog, I believe that's what it's called, LifeLog project, that ended on the day Facebook began. So the military-industrial complex essentially just uses public-private partnership, or private corporations as fronts to control the populace, right? So all of it is one big club, if you will, and we're not part of it. These are the experts that rule over you, right? These are the technocratic elites, the homo deus, the godmen. And this is how they see themselves. They literally see themselves as, as a human being who has an interest in ant farms. It's how a human being would look at an ant farm, right? Or a termitory, or some sort of vivarium or terrarium that they have constructed and filled with living organisms or fauna of some kind. This is how they look at us. We're in a giant sort of petri dish. We're in a alchemical alembic or cucurbit. We are the object that is being transmuted vis-a-vis a sort of dialectical reaction, a perpetual dialectical reaction that continually goes on to thus generate motion, to generate chaos, which is effectively the higher form of order. And that is the currency of change. It's what establishes new modes of being and living within society. And of course, these new modes are the service, the desires, and the progress, the vision of the ruling class. They progress it forward. So it is a fascinating development that the nothing ever happens sentiment is now so dominant, thus rendering it as its own orthodoxy in many ways. It is a manufactured confidence, as any predator would do in relation to its prey. So by ensuring that a true biowarfare agent is initially perceived as perhaps just another scam, and again, this is just mere speculation on my part. It's intellectual speculation. I'm not necessarily saying this is what they're going to do or this is the case, but it's something we should think about, because it's something that makes logical sense, and it's something they would, in fact, do, because they are that malevolent and that scheming and that conniving. So, as suggested by the Hanta means scam sentiment, which, by the way, Hanta does not mean scam in Hebrew slang. It does in Hungarian. The word people are thinking of and are getting sort of tripped up with is charta. Charta means bullshit in Hebrew. Hanita means little spear. It also has another meaning, I forget now. Hanita, ita is sort of diminutive, I believe, in Hebrew, if I recall correctly. Hanita means embalming or mummification, though if it's used in an agricultural context, as sometimes it is used in the Old Testament, then it can take on the sort of conception, the meaning of ripening, like a ripening fruit, not a ripe fruit, but the process of ripening itself. Again, very interesting if you tie this in with the harvest concept, basically the cull, right? Hence the Georgia Guidestones. Georgia comes from Georgikos. It's Greek. It's a Greek verb. It means farm work. It can also mean harvest as well, or it can be a sort of a denotation of harvest in a roundabout way, implicitly. So hence Georgia Guidestones is the guidestones to the harvest. Yeah, so the predator minimizes through this initial friction. So the rampant skepticism and distrust that was manufactured from the previous corona operation ensures that by the time a high fatality agent or poison, like a 30 to 50% mortality, is recognized as real, the window for both systemic and community containment has already closed. So in such a scenario, if mass depopulation via biowarfare agent, poison, or gain of function, contagion, if you will, whatever, or pharmacological agent, whatever they can in essence cook up in their facilities, occurs under the cover of a natural outbreak that everyone thought was fake, the system maintains and in fact elevates their own legitimacy. It can claim it tried to warn people, but the unprepared masses and the rampant skepticism of the dissident population refused to heed any warning. This aligns with the data center build-out and the exponential need for both energy and resources, thus necessitating depopulation somewhere down the line of to ensure the emergence of an AI dominant system or algocracy, and the circumstances imperative for its existence and long-term safety. Quote, I would want my prey utterly convinced it has my stratagem accurately identified. The prey thinks it sees me, but my angle of attack comes from a position it a priori ruled out due to its past engagements with me. Unquote. That was Eros. I stated. The polycrisis, simultaneous food, energy, and pestilential crises, is what shall be utilized to deny resources and energy to the primary competitor of the emergent AI system, namely that of the human host. So by inducing the polycrisis, the predator achieves two goals simultaneously. Firstly, efficiency. It settles the exponential energy resource debate as it pertains to AI by physically removing the competition, the human population, and in legacy or legitimacy, it preserves the widely perceived myth of its own necessity, that being, upon the striking of the natural catastrophe, the system can claim it tried to warn the skeptical and unprepared masses. Ergo, it utilizes the prey's own distrust as the justification for its demise, in addition to introducing the cacophony of wars and market disruption as a means of denying fuel and energy to the human population. Moreover, couple this with aviation fuel and domestic fuel shortage, destruction, and intentional sabotage, as is occurring worldwide, it will be able to ensure that a greater volume of fuel shall be available upon the market for the data center build-out. In short, less points of storage will inevitably lead to lessened expenditure of fuel and energy by the previous civilian governmental buyers. It is an inverted Cassandra curse, in essence, a reverse credibility trap. Systems that repeatedly manipulate public perception can degrade collective signal discrimination. After enough propaganda failures, contradictory messaging, censorship, episodes, institutional reversals, and media spectacle, populations become epistemically exhausted, cognitively spent. At that point, both gullibility and reflexive disbelief increase simultaneously. That is historically what has always occurred, especially with the rise and fall of empires. So the danger in that is that once every signal is treated as deception, accurate threat recognition deteriorates alongside trust. And this is what all of this hinges upon. So they're going to weaponize our own distrust of the government against us. So I suspect that everything we are bearing witness to is part of a global alchemical transmutation and a socio-political economic restructuring of the system itself will discombobulate in the masses through the polycrisis. In such a state, coupled with the priming for the incredible and the ensuing idiocracy and hypersuggestibility that has afflicted the masses as of late, it will inevitably render them as prima materia, pure potential, putty in their hands essentially, ready to be remolded and reshaped into whichever form the system deems necessary to its persistent, uninterrupted survival and the realization of its teleological or end state goals. Like Kircher's Pyrophylaciorum, or the Mundus Subterraneus, or the axioms presented in that framework, which themselves are merely reformulations and rehashings of older Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and alchemical concepts. I mean, they've been studying us for thousands of years, how to control humankind, and of course with civilization. That itself is a model of human containment and the containment of God, right? Because, of course, humanity is the image of God. Humanity carries the divine spark. So by controlling and curtailing the divine spark through corralling it into these artificial environments known as cities, which, you know, are entirely artificial, what you find is that they're almost creating a sort of containment chamber for this unpredictable, unquantifiable element inherent to humanity itself, that which we would call the image of God, the breath of God, the divine spark. And this containment chamber could also be seen as a cucurbita, an alembic, an alchemical alembic, where all of the reaction takes place. It can also be seen as a self-feeding tower furnace. This is the engine of history, right? The hyperstitional engine of history. Everything is this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. The greatest sort of vector of leverage, the avenue of leverage that one can take against a human being is that of weaponizing ideas, getting them to believe these ideas, and in doing so, domesticating them, right? And of course, conquering their own consciousness, effectively turning them into projectors of your own will, of your own vision, right? Because effectively the only thing that exists is human consciousness. That is the divine spark, right? Or it's what at least is powered by the divine spark. So that is the currency itself. That is the thing. This is incessantly sought to be capitulated between each epoch, right? Every epoch that we have had. This is the model of civilization, which is a model of human domestication, incremental human domestication, to the point that we're at now, which is this cycle's attempt at entirely controlling us, entirely, effectively turning us in to biodigital, sort of biodigital nodes, right? Without any sort of thinking of our own. that were these sorts of, again, like blank slates, tabula rasas for the internet of all things, right? We have become so merged with the machine that we just allow it to passively extract our engagement and our time and our energy and our potential as well, right? A system without any the potential of any rebellion. That's what they desire. Again, effectively an eternal loop.
Today, it's impossible for your clinician, your doctor, to give you the best advice. They want to give you the best advice, but it's impossible with 100 new developments all over the world being released. So, since our phones, we can find you, obviously it won't be long before you're going to have your medical teammate who has all your clinical information, all your medical information, will have surveyed everything in the world that's gone on overnight while you were sleeping. And therefore, we have to think who's going to power billions of these, and the same thing's going to happen in education. But what we've seen here in this artificial intelligence, and here's a slide, 4 times the accuracy of a human doctor. So these should be available to every single person on the planet someday.
A negative feedback loop, meaning that effectively the system is never ending, it's eternal, it's negentropic, it goes beyond entropy, it's beyond the reach of entropy, or of decay. It's self-regulating. So, I mean, they've had this plan for thousands of years. I mean, you can see it in Plato's The Republic, Plato, Pythagoras. I mean, there were several of them, of course. Even Socrates, arguably, was most likely part of this clique, though he was never initiated. So we're led to believe by Plato. He was never initiated into the mysteries because he didn't have to be initiated. He already knew these things instinctively. However, Plato, Pythagoras, they were all initiated into the mysteries. And even the Eleusinian mysteries, the Samothracian mysteries, all of the various Romano-Hellenic mysteries, be them the later Mithraic mysteries or what have you, they were all from Kabbalah. They're all based on Kabbalah. And Kabbalah, if you look at Sanskrit, Kabbalah or Kabbalah, it is it's the study, effectively, of the cranium. It's the study of the mind. It's the study of the seat of the soul. Or I believe another rendition of it is the study, rather, of the shadow that is the mind, which, of course, the divine spark casts the shadow. It casts the shadow, meaning the divine spark casts the subjective reality. Right? The subjective reality is the reality that we conjure in our own mind. That fundamentally that is the only reality that we can know of. The objective reality is elusive to us. Right? This is why, of course, the Platonic cave works as an allegory to describe the sort of subjectivity, that sort of inherent vulnerability in man himself. Because man dictates his reality subjectively, meaning through mediating filters, the primary one being the mind itself, that all you have to do is to reprogram that filter, the mind, in this case, vis-a-vis ideas and conceptual fields, what we know as society and social messaging, and effectively you can make the mind believe a complete fantasy, things that really are utterly absurd to those not initiated into these collective delusions, right? Be them whatever they may be. I mean, one comes to mind in our own world, which is the sort of gender inversion. If you have not been keeping up with the sort of TV programming, that itself, that idea that effectively you can sort of change your costume, change how you present yourselves, right? Change your makeup, if you will, right? Put on the veneer of womanhood or manhood, and you become that gender that you can, sort of switch around genders at will. It's just utterly laughable. And of course, there's many, many ways that they try and reinforce this, right? They try and see it in nature. They try and see it in that of other animals, right? Again, these are all ways of reinforcing the delusion. But the overarching point is, unless you've been keeping up with the programming, you will not accept that as normal, right? Unless, of course, you're totally glued to the goggle box, which is it's the modern Platonic cave. And you're sort of watching the shadows, these simulacras, dance upon the cave wall. And there's something to that as well, which is that people believe the image to be the real thing. So this is what the subjective mind does. It sees the shadows, the images, if you will, and it believes them to be the objectively real thing, right? So, for example, I've stated it previously regarding sort of Christian theology, but if I was to take an image of a panda or any animal, and I was to show you that image, right? Is that image the animal itself, or is it one narrow angle of the animal? Is it a mere image of the animal? Is it a mere likeness of the animal? Or is it the animal itself? Of course, people would answer it's just an image of the animal, right? It's a singular, narrow frame of the animal. It's not the holistic animal. It's all of the views of the animal, the entire being of the animal, the essence of the animal. But in the world, especially a world dictated and run by and addicted to, in a very sort of adult way, social media, it sees all of these things, all of these images, everything. It just believes them, right, to be the real thing. It's to the point now where the majority of people, especially in the sort of cosmopolitan centers of our world, these people ultimately are simulacras of humans. The emotions that they express are sort of learned behaviors, learned responses that they've sort of been dictated to by the social media platforms, the short form content. And you can see this because the emotions that they convey a lot of them are not from the heart. And it goes beyond just merely putting on a sort of social mask. I think fundamentally they're developmentally disabled in certain ways. The emotions that they show are almost, again, they're simulacra of emotions. In the truest sense of the word. If they show you elation or happiness, it's this sort of over-the-top caricature of happiness or what have you, If they are to show sadness, they don't sit solemnly, alone with their own thoughts. They have to get onto social media. They have to make content about it. They have to get the views, the likes, the social validation. That, of course, their dopaminergic mind, or pardon me, their dopaminergically hijacked mind is so hedonistically fixated on. So they don't experience emotions themselves. They're almost like actors. They've become actors in a role. This is what influencers and content creation and social media platforms ultimately produce, at least with the short form content. Again, these things are almost fast tracked with such a thing, such a medium. These people cry on cue, essentially. There was one woman where she was taking selfies at her father's wake, at the funeral ceremony. taking selfies and doing a weird, very boorish TikTok dance in front of her father's open casket. Just anything for likes and content. And of course, with all content, it becomes more and more and more shocking because you have to maintain engagement, and you can only do that through shock and awe, ultimately. And this is, of course, what we see the same thing with the governments themselves. I mean, do you notice that these narratives are beginning to become more and more ridiculous, concurrent with the ridiculousness and the sort of popularization of social media short form content as the primary medium in which people are receiving their information, or their news, or their media consumption? Well, the reason for that is they have to produce these ridiculous narratives. They have to, have disclosure on the aliens. They have to have UFOs. They have to have fake alien invasions. They have to have the rat virus on the cruise ship. They have to have all of the. They have to have this complete and utter dramatization of the entire world, right? And to sort of create a captivation field of fear and hyperbole and exaggerated narratives and stories. Because ultimately, if you're dealing with a dopaminergically hijacked population whose hedonic, meaning their pleasure thresholds, are unbelievably high, right? Like any drug addict, they have to take more and more and more. They have to they have to take greater and greater volumes of the drug to get the same sort of high, because they become more and more and more immune to it as they hijack their body's responses and their for example, with opium, you're hijacking your body's opiate receptors. So this is the sort of feel good receptors that takes you to that place of bliss and sort of paradise. And so eventually you sort of desensitize those receptors. You need greater and greater volumes of that drug to reach the same sort of high that you did in the beginning. It's the same thing with short form content, right? Because these basically belligerent nincompoops that effectively still number the majority of the population, they require greater and greater levels of hyperbolic, sort of shocking narratives to thus grab their attention. And by grabbing their attention, you're thus providing them dopamine. So this is why things will become more and more and more ridiculous as time goes on, especially if short form content, becomes more and more shorter in form. If the duration decreases markedly with that, then it will become more and more ridiculous, right? Because that'll desensitize even further these dopaminergic responses within the population, within the human being himself. So they know us inside and out. All of this is well understood. So this system maintains its equilibrium and negates the effect of entropy by preempting and inflicting a controlled form of anarchic violence and disorder periodically, reset to reset, epoch to epoch, as a means of depressurization of the system and to effectively balance the books. This is the void economy, right? F equals minus F. F is, of course, as well the sixth letter of the alphabet, interestingly, of the English alphabet. This was Newton's second law of thermodynamics, I believe. Equal and opposite forces, of course. So, and of course, the enacting of equal and opposite forces upon one another. The way they view all of this is it's a thermodynamic formula of control. I mean, it's quite deep when you get to this level in terms of their almost pedantic accountancy of control and population management and perception management. All of this is perception management, as we've just stated. So these resets, like in any game where the winner must deceive the abject and losing players into continuing to play the game, believing, of course, they can win. Again, you manage their perception. You make them believe that they can win the rigged game, right? To maintain their own imaginary status of being the said winner. Typically, this occurs every 250 years and follows the pattern of fiat currency. It's a mathematical impossibility for fiat currencies to continue for more than 250 years. So there's basically a mathematical threshold to it. And beyond that point, it becomes difficult to basically inflate and deflate and balance the books, so to say, of the system itself. You also create mass, because fiat currency, basically a vessel for conscious control of the individual, right? You have to believe in money for it to have any sort of semblance of value to you. So the value itself is relational. It's subjective. It's not necessarily objective. It is an instrument for the control of the subjective mind. Hence currency, right? The banks issue the currency, meaning the banks of the river control the direction of the meanderings, the ebbs and flows of the river, and the ultimate direction of the river beyond the ebbs and flows. And it also, again, the currency, the liquidity, it carries the flow, right? It carries you, the sort of mindless, rudderless entity. It carries you along the current of that said river. So this is part of Langverse or Twilight language, basically the hidden mechanisms and or architecture of the system itself, hidden within the language. Anyway, fiat currency, it derives that artificial prosperity through imbalances within the system itself. So it basically creates prosperity out of nothing, and it steals from the future its prosperity, because again, it's sort of all of this is being fueled on a lie, and eventually the lie will be uncovered, and then the system will collapse because there will be no confidence in the system anymore. So again, that's how it functions. It establishes these imbalances, and eventually the imbalances come home to roost. So they have to preempt these imbalances within the system, and of course have a reset every 250 years or so to bring forth a new system, a new empire as well. So larger reset cycles are also present here, with the entire cyclical progression compartmentalized and resembling the structure of the Matryoshka dolls or Russian nesting dolls. The larger cycles are 26,000 years approximately. Those are the precessional cycles. So the majority of species have no idea how the system functions, thus they shall continue to fall foul of it on a seemingly endless scale. So some terminology to sort of wet our whistle here. Auto-hoaxing. This is probably the most well understood idea, which is that the system conditions dissidents to reflexively classify every future threat as theatre or fabrication, thereby converting skepticism itself into the delivery mechanism of an eventual cataclysmic black swan event. So the prey internalizes the camouflage protocol in a sense. So moreover as well, the inverse credibility trap. So this is that the legitimacy is regained precisely through prior deception. After enough genuine manipulation, the target can no longer discriminate between false alarms and real attacks. This is all designed, right? Predatory skepticism seeding. A predator deliberately cultivates disbelief ecosystems so the authentic danger encounters reduced resistance latency. And then we have the Cassandra inversion, as we've stated prior. So this is the warning system is sabotaged by flooding prior events with ambiguity, spectacle, contradiction, and narrative contamination until genuine alarms become socially inaudible. And then we have autoimmune dissent. That is where dissident culture becomes self-destructive. Its defensive reflexes attack valid threat perception instead of infiltration vectors. The epistemic immune system begins targeting itself. This is why I call terminal discernment. People, they deconstruct everything to such a degree that fundamentally they deconstruct everything that could have provided them a semblance of anchorage or control or agency, not just within their own individual being, but within, of course, that of their community itself. This is terminal discernment, as I call it. So the epistemic immune system begins targeting itself. So we have also as well strategic anti-credulity conditioning. So this is prolonged exposure to manipulation conditions, a population into permanent disbelief, which is, of course, the teleology, the primary purpose, making them vulnerable to a real event timed after trust collapse saturation. We have orthodoxy of negation. This is where skepticism calcifies into a doctrine. Nothing ever happens becomes not analysis, but a sort of liturgy, a modern liturgy. And then we have, of course, as well, this is a well-known one, the predator's blind angle or the predator's blind spot. The attacker trains the prey to overfit against the previous attack pattern, ensuring the next vector arrives through the excluded possibility space. So what this is basically the gambler's fallacy, the weaponization of the gambler's fallacy. This is the final one, reflexive disconfirmation architecture. Informational terrain is engineered so that every incoming signal is automatically interpreted as psyop noise until actionable response becomes impossible. And then the final is the hoax ratchet. That is where each perceived deception tightens future disbelief, increasing vulnerability to a later authentic catastrophe. And this eventually, of course, leads into Incredulicide, which is the engineering of a population's demise by weaponizing their own disbelief. Incredulicide. So this term describes the tactical end state of the nothing ever happens phenomenon, where the predator ensures the prey's ultimate vulnerability is their absolute manufactured certainty that the threat does not exist. And this is, of course, produced vis-a-vis epistemic baiting. Now, what is that? It's the practice of feeding a dissident or skeptical population low-fidelity feints to give them a false sense of informational dominance, a manufactured confidence. The predator allows the prey to feel they have successfully decoded the system's lies, locking them into an epistemic trap where they will automatically reject any future threat as just another iteration of the same deception. And this is almost an outgrowth of cognitive exhaustion. And this is what you see in late-stage civilizations or empires. The Cassandra inversion. So in mythology, Cassandra was cursed to speak the truth, but never to be believed. In this tactical inversion, the system orchestrates a scenario where the dissident population believes they are the truth-tellers exposing a hoax, while the system effectively acts as the true Cassandra in light of the physicality of the ensuing death toll, issuing real documented warnings about a biological threat or resource crisis, whatever it may be, that it knows that the public has been psychologically conditioned to ignore by the system's own perceivable hitherto corruption. And of course, this corruption is publicized, it's made apparent. This is the reason for the Epstein scandal. This is the reason they brought this to light. They want you to think they're corrupt. They want you to know that they are corrupt. They want you to know that they know, that they are corrupt, So this is the reasoning for that. That just didn't come out of the blue. The GFK files as well. Well, look, for example, on YouTube now. I mean, you can now, there's channels now that are becoming extremely popular. Again, none of this is grassroots, as Plato stated himself. all the way back. Even the ancient philosophers stated everything in society is controlled. It's simulacra, right? It's a projection, projected vis-a-vis ideas disseminated into the popular zeitgeist by that of the system itself. Everything you believe has been fed to you in some fashion. Even, of course, what I believe, right? And we all have beliefs. Everything you believe, it's drawn to you by osmosis, and it is a simulacra to some degree. Some of them are useful, right? Some you need them for utility, right? Once, of course, you get a grip of it yourself, and once you understand the limitations of your own cognition. But bear in mind, everything you witness in society is basically a trickle-down effect, conceptually speaking and sort of informationally speaking. None of this. They choose your leaders. They choose the opposition. And of course, they don't have to directly choose them now. They can indirectly choose them, because all what we have now is algorithmic determination of reach. So the algorithm, through formulas and mathematical modeling, and it basically serves the interests of the system itself. What do they want to be pushed? What message, what social messaging do they want pushed? Well, they'll just simply push the creator. Pardon me, a creator that's making a name for himself in this specific topic or social messaging that they, it's sort of pushing this social messaging that they already seek to have pushed. They will simply just bump up his numbers. They will make him viral. So this is the economy of virality. It's basically a disguise by the system itself, right? You're already in technocracy in a sense. All of it's fundamentally automated, algorithmically. It's just we don't necessarily see it directly, and there's still more tightening of the sort of digital straitjacket that they have to do upon us.
I normally wouldn't make a video like this, but I feel like I need to say something, so I wrote a few things down. I am currently on board the MV Hondius, and what's happening right now is very real for all of us here. We're not just a story. We're not just headlines. We're people. People with families, with lives, with people waiting for us at home. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that's the hardest part. All we want right now is to feel safe, to have clarity, and to get home. So if you're seeing coverage about this, just remember that there are real people behind it, and that this isn't something happening somewhere far away. It's happening to us right now. I'll share more when I can, but for now, I just ask for your kindness and understanding. Thank you.
So this secures the system's legacy and legitimacy post-collapse, as it will blame the death toll on the ignorance of the masses and the vilified dissident messengers or conspiracy theorists. This will bring forth the actionable pretext to then censor and centralize control of the internet, along with the ensuring that monitoring through the ID or digital ID verification for social media platform participation gains wide-scale approval amongst a jaded, weary, and deracinated populace. We also have soporific dissent. That's a manufactured state of resistance that acts as a sedative. So by funneling the population's anxiety into a rigid orthodoxy of skepticism, e.g. everything is a psyop, for example, the system pacifies them. The prey feels a rush of intellectual superiority and rebellion, which replaces the need for actual physical preparation or containment protocols, leaving them completely exposed. We also have autopoietic camouflage. So that's a broader systemic term for the chaos, polycrises, and conflicting narratives generated to obscure the transition of a system from human-dependent to fully autonomous analgocracy. The noise of the scams and the resulting societal discombobulation acts as the camouflage under which the final resource reallocation occurs. Right? Again, they're denying us resources, and they will provide the resources entirely to that of the data center infrastructural build-out, which is the crowning jewel upon the nascent technocratic system. So, quote, another fierce psyop gain of function virus to manipulate and control the masses. This was a top comment on a video. And by the way, it's a mainstream news article on Hanta, or a mainstream news sort of bulletin or coverage on Hanta. So by assuming the goal is merely to manipulate and control, the prey operates under the comforting delusion that the predator still needs them alive, right? Yet we appear to be drifting into a post-human system. So the implicit belief vis-a-vis the manipulation and control of the masses, which is, of course, what the idea regarding fear psyops and gain of function viruses and utilized to manipulate and control the masses. The implicit belief in that is that the commenter affirms that the system needs them alive. The system doesn't need you alive, or at least doesn't need as many of you alive. The way it's acting, everything surrounding its policies, even the sort of obfuscated truth behind its policies and what it's actually doing, none of it appears to be, none of it's based around a human-centric society long term. It looks to me to be sort of building up the support columns for an eventual post-human society, an algocracy, a rule by algorithm, a technocracy. Again, a rule by experts. They've been speaking about this for literal millennia, as we've been discussing. Plato's Calopolis, Tommaso Campanella's City of the Sun, Thomas More's Utopia, all the way to, of course, the sci-fi, Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, all the way to the sci-fi writers in the 20th century, H.G. Wells, Huxley, Orwell. And of course, all of these individuals were part of the sort of server intelligentsia, sort of scientific class of the ruling elite. Another one is Tragedy and Hope, which wasn't necessarily sci-fi, but it was a sort of a controlled revelation of the method by that of Carroll Quigley, who outrightly states he was a historian for this group, right? So he was part of the intelligentsia, the sort of dynastic intelligentsia or scientific server classes for this group. And of course, Plato's Calopolis, that class would be those of the souls of silver, the enforcer class, at least the sort of top rung of the enforcer class. So in the tactical framework of autoimmune hoax conditioning, this is the most critical deception of all, the illusion of the parasite, that we believe that they are parasites, that they need us, they need the host. But do they? Eventually, the parasite realizes the sort of zero-sum game that it's in. Eventually, entropy will catch up to it, and of course, catch up with its host. And eventually, it will miscalculate, and it will all fall apart, the entire house of cards, and they'll no longer be spinning the plates, which will then come crashing down to the floor and smash into 1,000 tiny pieces. And they will spend another 10 to 20,000 years trying to rebuild these pieces, to glue them together and to begin the plate spinning once more, right? But it wouldn't be much of a logical leap. It's actually a sort of logical inference to believe that they would create a system that would almost, again, allow them to transcend the limitations of that sort of parasitical extraction model, to the point where they are the host and we would be the parasite, right? Everything would be flipped around. They would no longer need us. We would be the one leeching from them through, of course, living in their biodigital Internet of all things, a world of total interconnectedness, total interment, by the way, in the interred net, of the source of predatory spider of the system. Anyway, historically, the ruling class has operated as a parasite, right? A parasite relies on the host for its own survival. It extracts labor, taxes, compliance, and energy engagement focus. A parasite may sicken the host, but it generally avoids killing it outright, because a dead host means a dead parasite. The dissident population, having studied history, assumes the system still operates under these rules, under this paradigm. They believe the system is the old man behind the green curtain, a frail entity that uses theatrical fear psyops to maintain its grip on the livestock. This conditions the prey to believe, firstly, the threat is purely psychological, they just want us to be scared. Secondly, the prey is indispensable, they need us to work, consume, pay taxes, and to focus upon the theatre. Number three, the system lacks kinetic lethality. They wouldn't release a real weapon because it would hurt their bottom line, unquote, or words to that effect. But what the comment above fails to realize and account for is that the advent of the algocracy and AGI fundamentally alters the biological relationship within the dynamo of the system of power. If the system achieves autopoiesis, which is self-regulation, powered by massive data centers, automated robotics, and sovereign AI, it no longer requires a massive human labor force to sustain itself. The system is transitioning from a parasite, which needs the host, to an apex predator, which simply needs the host's territory and resources. Once the humans are no longer required as a labor or consumer base, they immediately become resource competitors, draining the finite energy and water required by the 1.2 gigawatt data centers. And this is exactly everything they're setting up, based around the control of resource checkpoints, or choke points rather, resource choke points, throughout the various trade routes of the world. All of that is designed to produce a narrative pretext, a sort of dissimulation, to ensure that they can bring about effectively rationing, and then once they reach a certain point, just fully cut you off from any energy. You get literal scraps, right? So they'll destroy this, as we've come to know it, this sort of comfort of the Western lifestyle. That will be gone, utterly eviscerated, because, again, you're becoming resource competitors. They don't require the labor or consumer base anymore. It's not necessarily required, at least not at the levels, not at the population numbers that we currently have. So this is the fatal comfort of the PSYOP. This is why the system actively cultivates the Wizard of Oz image within dissident circles. It is a highly effective form of long-term pacification. If a population believes their government is full of maniacal architects planning an imminent lethal cull, they will panic, arm themselves, flee cities, and build independent containment protocols. They will become highly unpredictable, high friction problem, right? However, if the population believes the government is just running another scam to sell needlecrafts or to uproot an election, they will confidently go about their daily lives, walking straight into the biological vector, the kill zone, while feeling intellectually superior. They will refuse to prepare for physical survival because they are too busy preparing for a psychological argument, right? The predator allows the prey to feel they have seen through the illusion because a prey that thinks it is merely being watched and manipulated will never brace for the kill shot. And this brings us to auto-hoax conditioning. That itself, as we've stated, is the model they have employed long term. They know they are corrupt, and they know that we know that they are corrupt. Hence, they do not attempt to hide it as such, as that would inevitably be a zero-sum game, as we can discern from the precedent set by history and the entropic life cycle of empires. No, they strategically lean into the corruption and establish a tactical bait-and-switch trap around the perception of their corruption and the innate suspicion that grows in the populace as an empire or civilization begins to age. In a literal autoimmune disease, the body's defense system becomes hypersensitized. Of course, this is all produced by needlecrafts as well. It loses its ability to distinguish between foreign threats and healthy tissue, and ultimately attacks the host it was designed to protect. Transposing that into this sort of prey-predator paradigm, this tactical framework of the autoimmune hoax condition and the AHC, if you will, it describes a sort of a mechanism of total exactitude by which a population's intellectual defense systems are weaponized against their own physical survival. So, sort of to put this into autoimmune or bio or pharmacological terminology, just for fun. Firstly, we may say regarding the antigen or the inoculation of distrust, they seed information to trigger an autoimmune response, right? Highly visible misinformation or institutional incompetence, non-coherence, just total corruption as well regarding a prior pathogen, right? Of course, in this case, it'd be that of corona. So this is the initial feint, the contradictory mask mandates, the confusion regarding the origin narratives, right? Or the easily debunked media panics, right? This was all planned. They're breadcrumbs that are placed. They want you to find them, right? It's a sort of ARG, an alternate reality game. They want you to find the breadcrumbs, because by you finding the breadcrumbs, and of course following the trail, connecting the dots, if you will, because again, they want you to connect the dots, because they placed the dots there for you to connect them. Just, similar to the breadcrumb analogy. Firstly, there's a narrative sink, right? SINK. A sunk cost fallacy in that. If you spent 5 years looking into the system and how it's corrupt, or this given psyop or that given psyop, and firstly, you're going to be less inclined to believe all of the research that you have painstakingly undertaken is in fact all a lie. Not a lie as in it's not correct, but a lie as in it was placed there by the government for you to find easily, right? And moreover as well, you feel intellectual superiority compared to the rest of the majority, or ignorant of what you know, the special information you know, right? There's a certain elitist or exclusivist idea in all of this, right? And then moreover as well, because you follow the breadcrumbs yourself, you actually feel as though you've reached these conclusions of your own accord. It's in that position, that cognitive position, you're less inclined to eventually sort of turn away from basically what are low-grade, highly visible misinformation. Feints, right? Feints by the system, breadcrumbs by the system, ARGs, right? You're never going to look at these deeper, in any deeper way. And then secondly is the sort of cytokine storm, which is the hyper-skepticism. So once the population has successfully defeated the initial feints, their psychological immune system goes into overdrive, if you will. They begin producing antibodies against all institutional messaging. Everything's fake, right? Total full spectrum skepticism, effectively. So in a biological cytokine storm, the immune response becomes so violent that it destroys the lungs and organs. And of course, autoimmune hoax conditioning, this framework, the hyperskepticism becomes so pervasive that it destroys the community's basic survival instincts and even the basic conceptual foundations of their own coherence and cohesiveness. So we become all yechidim, which is sort of solitary units in Kabbalistic thought, and of course in Hebrew as well. So we become disjointed, detached. We basically destroy all potential community feelings or instincts, right? We don't build larger localized communities because fundamentally we're busily deconstructing everything in our society. Again, I'm not saying it shouldn't be deconstructed, but it's being deconstructed according to this, of course, speculative framework that I'm putting forward here. It's being deconstructed by, or on the orders rather, of the system itself. Right? They're placing the breadcrumbs for you to become a full spectrum skeptic. So every warning is attacked as fear, porn, loosh, harvesting, or a psyop. This even affects talking about technocracy, right? Talking about the sort of the very historical provenance and the absolute antiquity of this system, this agenda, this desire for the technocratic or scientific dictatorship. The people themselves, because I don't know, they may say history is false or fake or what have you. Eventually, all of it gets muddled and muddied. It poisons the well. It sort of muddies the water. It creates a sort of confusion, right? So you no longer have the language of the society or the culture to rely upon to discuss these ideas and to provide frameworks in which you can, of course, explore power's slow incremental encroaching, into our very lives, into micromanaging everything, and to eventually reach its technocratic utopian goal, right? And then thirdly, it attacks the host, right? There's self-sabotage. This is where the manufactured confidence achieves its lethal objective. The skepticism is no longer protecting the prey, it is actively killing them. The prey may refuse to don any active measures against this physical or real threat. Again, they may see it as a psyop. They may be so confounded that, they can't separate the fact from the fiction. They can't even trust their eyes anymore. So it may produce that sort of neurotic effect as well, which may leave us vulnerable to an actual direct biowarfare attack by the system. So the prey's own defense mechanism, their pride in being awake and untricked, becomes the exact mechanism of their exposure, their vulnerability, their susceptibility. They walk right into the predator's jaws, utterly convinced they are outsmarting the system. And then fourthly, and this is finally, the pathogen drop, the algocratic transition. So with the population's threat assessment faculties completely turned inward and neutralized by, of course, as we've stated, this framework of autoimmune hoax conditioning, the predator is free to introduce, rather, the true catastrophic agent, the polycrisis or engineered biowarfare agent, the mass poisoning. There would be no friction, no unified resistance, and no containment. The system would achieve its massive reduction of the human population, securing the exponential energy and resources required for AI data centers, all the while the prey spends its final moments typing, "This is all BS, this is a psyop," so on and so forth, right? So, quote, by framing it as an autoimmune condition, it perfectly illustrates the tragic irony of the tactic. The predator doesn't defeat the prey's defenses. The predator tricks the prey into letting its defenses consume it from the inside out. Fear is a powerful ally, raising perception and instigating critical thinking abilities. Fear reduction via misplaced hubristic confidence is a manufactured pseudo-analysis that blinds the prey, dulls the mind via illumination. This is what I was trying to get at yesterday. The elite will be hyper-focused on a prime objective. That objective lies on a line of time, with sub-objectives in between being gamed out decades ahead of schedule. I would actually say centuries ahead of schedule, but nonetheless, one may dare to say that as a generalization, the truth conspiracy movement is designed to blind would-be disruptors via illumination itself. Darkness blinds, but so can the light. And often I have found the strange light of the darkness, that bright darkness, offers a penetrating gaze. That was Eros that stated that, unquote. So I'll get into how human society is being made into measurable informational units, and of course being made safe for AI and being optimized for AI, essentially, an AI contingent and an AI-centric system. But on the eradication of the analog soul, by inducing the polycrisis and weaponizing this framework of the autoimmune hoax conditioning, as we've stated above, the system disorientates the population enough to strip away their analog unpredictability, again, that unquantifiable variable of the human soul, without resistance. Once humans are fully quantized as informational units, they are no longer a threat. They are merely input variables in the algocracy's database, variables that can be easily nudged, optimized, or, if needs be, the energy demands of the data centers require it, or as needs be, as in if the energy demands of the data centers require it, actively, instantaneously delete it. So the magic of the analog human soul is systematically replaced by the cold, flawless math of the AI or AGI machine. So yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell. That's what again, it's a speculative framework, but I think there's something to it. I think perhaps they may play a divergent tactic like this, so be aware of this, cogitate upon it. I'm not saying this is a fact or it's for real. Yeah, I just want to say as well, a rather polemical statement here, but the weaponization of our disbelief and the fact that we are now unable to fear is precisely what makes us vulnerable due to lessened threat detection capabilities. So if this is the case, then it is a genius move by the system itself.
Today, it's impossible for your clinician, your doctor, to give you the best advice. They want to give you the best advice, but it's impossible with 100 new developments all over the world being released. So, since our phones, we can find you, obviously it won't be long before you're going to have your medical teammate who has all your clinical information, all your medical information, will have surveyed everything in the world that's gone on overnight while you were sleeping. And therefore, we have to think who's going to power billions of these, and the same thing's going to happen in education. But what we've seen here in this artificial intelligence, and here's a slide, 4 times the accuracy of a human doctor. So these should be available to every single person on the planet someday.
And on this idea that this was intentional weaponized misinformation that we were seeing during COVID, I just want you to look at this. I'm going to have to, I may actually have, I'll need to check the music on this, but I may have to mute this. So you have to ask yourself why. Why did they do all this? Why were they doing this? The TikTok dancing nurses. Clearly an absolute fool could figure this out, that they're basically communicating. The signal is, the undeniable signal is that there is nothing going on in these hospitals. There was nothing going on in these hospitals. There was no, pandemic. It was all fake, And you'll notice that I can't play it here, but you'll notice that the main song that they were dancing to was Jerusalema, right? Which ties in with the whole Kabbalistic utopianism of the Tikkun Olam. And the lyrics of Jerusalema, I'll get it in English, by the way, because it's actually a Zulu gospel song. It goes, Jerusalem is my home. Guard me, rescue me. Walk with me. Do not leave me here. My place is not here. My kingdom is not here. Rescue me. Come with me. Rescue me. Rescue me. Again, rescue is almost like rectify, right? Like the Tikkun Olam. Don't leave me here. So the song gained massive international popularity as a prayer of hope during the C-19 pandemic, with many identifying with its plea for safety and spiritual homecoming. Of course, it's just called Jerusalema for no reason whatsoever. So there you go. I mean, why? What was the reason that they made this so viral? Basically a total troll, a complete insult to the entire population. People, old people were being murdered vis-a-vis what they were calling palliative care. It was basically end of life, a sort of end of life protocol, euthanasia, effectively. Here in Scotland, there was 10,000 that were murdered in the care homes, and you've got these little belligerent, of course, they're all actors. Nurses can't dance in synchronized patterns like this. These are actors. They would have as well brought in, almost undoubtedly, dance choreographers for this. So, yeah, there's just another one. That one's less professional than the last ones, but you get the sort of general gist. You've got their celebrate good times. So yeah, so why were they doing this? Why were they doing this? Was it designed, as we've just laid out with this autoimmune hoax conditioning? Was it designed to ensure that we would believe that they would never release a biowarfare agent upon the population, to sort of lull us into a false sense of security? That is a framework for speculation. I'm interested to see what other people think regarding this, But there's a reason for this. They're not just doing it to insult you, though. Don't get me wrong, that's an angle to it. They were probably having a good laugh at this in the sort of technocratic control room of the system. But there's more to this. There's more to this. It's a spectacle. What's the teleology of the spectacle? That's what you have to ask yourself.
The hantavirus was weird. It's about to get even weirder. Not only did they decide to send the sick people all around the world on airplanes, the internet is going crazy again because another predicted Twitter post. This account, Soothsayer, posted on June 10th, 2022, Corona ends in 20...
And you'll notice as well, like the previous ARG alternate reality game of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, you also had Henry Martinez. I think it was 2012 or so, I forget now. But he posted, yeah, it was 2023. It was sometime in December 2023. He posted regarding Trump's assassination, right? And also, Cole Allen. He posted Cole Allen. So that itself is the same blueprint that you're seeing here. Same blueprint, just to point that out.
2023, 2026, hantavirus. He hasn't posted since 2022 and only had 3 other tweets. The best part, his bio reads the future. So with Hanta and all of this, I'm not an expert. I just like connecting things to the stock market because I follow the money, just like I did in 2020, 3 months before the lockdown. I don't think we're at that level yet, but if this news cycle can...
And there's also another reason for this, which is that there's an economic or monetary reason for these various dramatic crises, this polycrisis as well. Even, of course, with the whole C-19, the corona event, which is that it permits economic restructuring and the passage of draconian laws and a new framework of basically a societal being and living. But moreover as well, it allows them to sort of prop up the fiat currency system a little longer until they get to 2030. Because it permits them to effectively provide, it doesn't permit them, it provides them a reason, a pretext to print money, to inflate the currency supply and to provide buoyancy to the system, ultimately.
Continues, there is another play emerging that isn't a biotech stock since there's no direct exposure there. To some of you, this might be weird, thinking about profit when it comes to serious things, but like I even said in 2020, people have been doing this since the 90s, sadly. Even these plays I'm sharing with you today, every time there was a health freak out, they would move, and when everybody would calm down, they would go down heavy. They are the PPE protection wear stocks, APT and Lake. APT already went up over 37% today. Lake went up 12%. And I was talking about them at 7:40 a.m. this morning. That means you are not getting the best price. It just depends on what happens. I hope you're paying attention.
The area of recklessness is the spending of governments around the world, who are all, with little exception, all spending well beyond their means. That's the recklessness of this moment in history. This is not a parallel to the 1920s in terms of the recklessness of the private capital markets. It's a story of the recklessness of government spending. Within the private sector, there's a huge question as to where AI will take us. And I was carefully taking notes and listening to what Larry has to say, or to what Madame Lagarde has to say, because this is one of the big issues of our moment. Will AI create the productivity acceleration that is honestly just hoped for in Washington and in the halls of government around the world as a way to overcome the profligate spending that we're currently engaged in? Like, the world needs a savior, and the hope is that AI is the savior that we need for productivity. And the challenge with this is it may or may not be. We just don't know yet.
Really what's happening is that we have been, and we still are, and for the next 10 years we will be, rewiring the global economy to lay the networks that we laid before, which were highways, utilities, railways, and now we're laying cloud, artificial intelligence factories, and data centers. And that, on the fundamental basis, that's what's happening. So there will be $10 trillion from power, AI, factories, data centers, and fiber build-out. laid to basically rewire the world for the new economy that's coming. And it's been slowly coming. Like it literally, you end up, things happen and you think they're too much, but we're just rewiring the world. And that's probably the most fundamental thing that's going on in the world. It's going to be the most important thing for the next 2 years. So I think the important thing is, don't think that this is it too much hype? Yes, there's always too much hype in some different thing. But we're just rewiring the world, and there's going to be enormous investment, and it's not 1 year, 2 year, it's 10, and maybe it's 15, and maybe it's 20. But it's an enormous amount of capital going into these things.
Let's move over to the headlines, because in September of 2025, Keir Starmer, who is their prime minister, announced a mandatory digital ID if you wanted to work in the UK. This pissed everybody off in the UK, like really pissed them off. And by January of 2026, nearly 3 million people had signed a petition, which is like the third or fourth largest petition that's ever been signed in the UK. And because of the vocality of the British and the Irish people, the government had folded. They did a 180 and they said that they were going to walk the digital ID back. Starmer said that the government's digital ID and the app that you have to keep on your phone will now be optional. However, the digital verification in order for you to work is still mandatory. They're just going to have you use private companies instead of going through the government directly. Companies like Yoti and iProve and Post Office Easy ID. But here's what nobody's explaining. When those companies verify you, they have to query a government database. Now, your right to work check will go through the Home Office system. Your driver's license gets verified by DVLA records. And who do you think runs the Home Office system? Well, as of October of 2025, Oracle does. They signed a $72 million cloud computing contract. DVLA also runs on Oracle's infrastructure. In fact, they were just awarded a pretty significant contract for Oracle Premier Support in March of 2025, valued to be around £2.8 million. Or how about your NHS patient records? There's no way Oracle has their paws on that, right? Right? Of course it also still runs on Oracle's infrastructure. It's just through a different company called Cerner, which they did acquire in 2022 for £28 billion. That's right, you can't escape it. Oracle is at the center of everything. Oracle, I'm pretty sure, is running the world. So the choice you're getting is which app you want to open, not which company is processing your data. The surveillance state didn't stop at the gates. It just gave you a choice of which front door you want to open to the same building. And Oracle built the building.
But consider the concern. So if you're rolling out what they're telling you, and clearly they believe, is the single greatest technological change in the history of human life on this planet, it's the biggest thing that's ever happened, ever, then you think one of your main concerns would be, well, does this change the relationship of the powerless to the powerful, the relationship of the citizen to the state, for example? One of your concerns would be, how do we do this and bring about the prosperity that it promises without totally eliminating human rights, making people slaves? Because we're against slavery, right? Aren't we against slavery? We were. How do we do that? But that doesn't seem to be Larry Fink's main concern. His main concern is, how do we protect our investment, this infrastructure, these buildings, these data centers? Someone could drone them. Someone could drone them. Now who? Foreign actors? Hezbollah? Hamas? No, just people. Larry Fink is concerned that ordinary American citizens, as he just said, will use $3,000 drones to destroy these billion-dollar investments. Why would he be worried about that? We've had electricity for over 100 years. There are 11,000 power plants in.
Hey, you guys, our favorite crisis actor, Crybaby Jake and Starbucks have teamed up to give us a nice little plug for what it's like living in a lockdown camp and how amazing it is and what a great staycation it is. I know. And a lot of people have forgotten that last time, the last pandemic during COVID, Hugh Grant basically did a little plug for Chanel No. 5 when he was trying to tell people that he lost his sense of smell. And then Chanel No. 5 purchases went skyrocketing through the roof. Gee, I wonder why. Let me just show you in case you forgot from last time. Hugh Grant actually said that he couldn't smell his wife's Chanel No. 5 when he lost his sense of smell during COVID-19 infection in early 2020. Desperate to test his symptoms, he sprayed the perfume directly into his face, resulting in no scent detection, only temporary eye irritation. Well, yeah, your eyeballs can't smell things, but I get what they were trying to say. But still. Anyways, this is Jake's plug for how fun lockdowns are. Maybe they're gonna name this drink after Crybaby Jake. Who knows?
Okay, I wanted to post this little update, and I'm not gonna get emotional, but something I have been craving so much is a good iced coffee. I have not had a really, really good iced coffee in so long now, and the nurses just delivered me an iced horchata shaken espresso with oat milk and vanilla cold foam, and I'm literally in heaven. I'm gonna take my first sip. Oh, this is everything I needed right now.
Oh, Jake, we are so proud of you. You know what I need right now? For this psyop to stop. Because it's getting old. And it's the same shit over and over and over again. Now, I totally understand that there's a fan base of NPC pushers that are going to love this. And honestly, I congratulate you guys. May you have their boosters forever. I'll even drive you to the clinics myself this time. Because honestly, last time warning you didn't get me anywhere. So this time I'm just going to encourage the ding-dongs to just follow Jake and be just like Jake. Call it the Jake Little Starbucks drink. Yeah. What the F? They're basically trying to normalize lockdown camps, you guys. With this, they're basically telling you all of the questions that people would have in the comment section, like, what do you eat in a day? Oh, what happens if you need prescription medication? And he just tells us how amazing the nurses are. It's almost like a hotel with nurses. Oh, isn't it going to be fun when, the governments lock us all up for, talking shit, misinformation, and so forth, the usual? Oh, it's going to be so much fun, you guys. Yay, lockdown camps. What the F, man? We need better psyops. These are getting old. Ugh. Central casting, do your job, man.
The disaster that we're preparing for isn't just this virus. You see, over July, August, September time, there's going to be a lot of political chaos around the world. Lots of riots and protests, terrorist attacks, governments being toppled, and fun stuff like that. Then comes a disaster with the virus. Then comes a big financial disaster. We need to prepare for all three of these things because
now you have to explain to people how the global economy works. You cannot tell people, oh, really, there are these secret people working behind the scenes that are projecting shadows onto a wall. So what you do is you create multilateral organizations that pretend to control the global economy. And they are the World Bank, the United Nations, WTO. You make people believe that this is all being controlled impartially for our benefit. Now, you have to convince people that the system is legitimate, that when you're actually seeing the shadows on the wall, they're real. And that's why you need the media. That's why you need culture, such as Hollywood, movies, basically. And you need education, school system. Okay? These are the people who are all prisoners, who have become leaders of the prisoners, and who are helping them understand the shadows on the wall.
So am I in the media?
Yes, you are.
Am I?
Yes.
So what am I doing? Am I one of the people in the fire controlling the narrative? Is that what?
Yes, yes.
But I'm not owned by anybody.
That's what you think.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Who am I owned by?
Ultimately, it's the people who control the fire that are in charge, right? So ultimately, it's these people, the second layer, the game masters, the financial elite that control everything.
And the financial elite, again, are like the World Bank, you said?
No. The financial elite are these private bankers.
Okay, so are the private bankers controlling me? Because you said I was in the media.
Do you want to make money?
Yeah.
Then they're controlling you.
Okay.
Right?
How are they controlling me?
Because they control the creation of money. And so now that you have the media, the schools, and the cultural systems helping people understand the shadows on the wall, these shadows now become internalized, and they dictate the values and norms of people, what they believe to be good and bad. They dictate habits and customs, how you live your life. And they dictate the legal system, who's punished for what, okay? And this becomes the top edifice. And what's amazing about the system is that in our minds, we believe that the system is, first of all, the complete opposite. where the foundation is actually the laws, the habits, and the values. When in fact, in reality, these are just figments of our imagination. Okay, that's point one. Point two is that this is a very, very delicate structure. So if anyone doesn't cooperate, okay, then this edifice collapses. It's because it's a very, very delicate system. Okay. And the third thing, and this is most important to understand the world that we live in, as the system becomes much more wobbly, meaning that young people don't really believe in the shadows anymore. Young people grow up and says, are these shadows really real? They don't feel real to me. The system needs to become much more authoritarian. It needs to force people to believe what they refuse to believe. Because everyone in the system is incentivized to ensure this edifice is stable.
Do you think this is somewhat linked to what's going on with independent media?
Exactly.
Because independent media are asking a lot of questions about the way society functions.
Exactly. And that's why we're seeing governments becoming very worried about independent media. Because if you have people in the population saying, these shadows are fake, this creates a ripple effect. It causes people to start questioning the shadows on the wall. You can't have that. So that's why it's important to have censorship. That's why it's important to deplatform people. That's why you have woke politics, DEI, because it's an enforcement mechanism.
Hello, my name is Ansley. I live in Coweta County, Georgia. We are Noonan, Sharpsburg, Grantville, Moreland, little bit all together there in Coweta County. I wanted to come on here today and talk about something that happened with my TikTok account. So I made 2 videos talking about how Georgia Power is taking families' homes and properties against their will. One of those being my own family. I have a personal connection to this story, which is why it's so important to me personally. Although nobody in this town wants a damn data center, our commissioners still approved it. So therefore, Georgia Power is using easement rights to force homeowners, longtime homeowners, old homeowners, into selling their family properties and their family homes so they can be torn down and power lines be extended to support these data centers. This is wrong on so many levels, but when I made these videos to speak out against it, TikTok banned my videos. They said that they're a violation of community guidelines. I never violated any community guidelines. I only came on here to tell the truth about what's happening in Coweta County, Georgia. This is happening to at least 30 people. Some of them are elderly, cannot handle this on their own. Some of these people have families. Some of these properties have been passed down by generation to generation. This is not an option for Coweta County homeowners. This is something they are being forced to do, even though there are many petitions and other things in place trying to make this stop. Our commissioners still approve these projects. It's wrong. And I feel like people should know that in America, you do not have the right to your land. You do not have the right to your property. They can come and take that from you, and there will be nobody there to help you. And when you speak out against it online, they'll ban your videos. They'll block you. They'll threaten to take away your whole entire account. There is no freedom of speech. There is no protection of property. It doesn't make any sense. And people should know about this. That's all I have to say.